Firstly, obviously, we've just seen incredibly moving film there about the Holocaust and particularly about the impact of it in a very, very human way. We're very, very fortunate this evening to be joined by Eva Schloss, who we saw in the film, who is the stepdaughter of Otto Frank, and also by John Wood, whose father we saw in the film was Major Leonard Berney, who was one of the liberators of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. We're also joined by Marta, who is currently playing Anne Frank in the Diary of Anne Frank, which is on this week, and also by Heather, who's playing Anne's sister, Margot. So we're going to just ask some questions, which I will we'll have some questions which I have for Eva and for John and for Marta and Heather, and then after that I'm going to just ask you if you have any questions at all, and just throw it open to the floor. Okay, we have about 30-35 minutes because, of course, particularly Marta and Heather have to get ready for tonight's performance, so I don't want to delay them. So I'm just going to sit with you. Eva, I wanted to begin with. I was very struck by one of the very last moments of the film when Buddy Elias says that humanity never seems to learn, and I wondered how that impacts upon you through your own experience and through your own campaigning, if you like, to make sure that we don't forget and that we through the generations understand.
Yes. Well, when I came back to Holland after Auschwitz, I just turned 16, and I learned that my father and brother hadn't made it, and I really wanted to tell people. I was full of the experience what had happened to me, what I'd seen, the terrible, terrible things I'd experienced, but the world didn't want to know. In Holland especially, it was called the Hunger Winter, because that was a country which had been occupied till the end. France, Belgium, and Greece, Norway, Denmark were liberated through the British and American armies already in September, October, but Holland was occupied till the very end, till May, till the peace, and the Germans took everything this country produced to feed their own people, to Germany. And so when we came back, people said we had the Hunger Winter, and there were no cats and dogs, they had all been eaten. Can you imagine? There was literally no food whatsoever. They found a family of 5 dead in their apartment. And then more people came back, wanted to tell more horror stories, and they just didn't want to know. But the only thing what people did say, we have learned our lesson, never any wars, never anything like Auschwitz, and things is going to change now. And at first it did. I think the first 20 years people were, well, all suffering, all big poverty in Germany, in all the occupied countries actually, not as bad as in Holland. And but then people started to be again more selfish and so on. But the survivors, at first when we were willing to speak, but then they didn't want to hear, and then we were not able to speak. When I got married in the 50s, I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my children. It had become too difficult, but it was all in my head. And in 1986, the first exhibition, Amsterdam became a museum, and the historians there decided they would make a traveling exhibition, because not everybody can come to Amsterdam and see the story from Anne and hiding and all that. And so this exhibition came, the very first one they made in English, of course, and it came to London. And of course I was invited to attend service. My mother, Otto, had died in 1980. He was 90 years old. My mother was actually 17 years younger than he was. And so Ken Livingstone, actually, who is accused of anti-Semitism, but I always defend him, he organized this exhibition, and he invited us, and there was a head table, and there sat some other people who were talking about how important it is to learn about those events. And he said to me, come and sit with us at the head table. So I did. I was very, very shy, never spoken to anything about that, not even have spoken about anything much. And then at the end he said, and now Eva, we want to say something to you. Well, I can tell you I wanted to hide under the table, but of course I couldn't do that. And so I looked at this audience, looking expectantly what I was going to say, and then suddenly the gates broke open and I just couldn't be stopped. And I told things, I mean, I have no idea what I said, but a bit this, a bit that, and so on. But it was for me a very, very important moment. I realized people want to know, people want to learn, and I could let go. Because till that day I had nightmares, it was always in my head. But from then on, the exhibition traveled all over England. I was always asked to open it, which I couldn't really do. I was not a public speaker. My husband wrote a speech for me, which I read very badly. I always had to take valerian to calm me down. And I didn't really like how my husband, I mean, how could he know what I really want to say? So eventually I found my own speech. And then people said, well, you have such an interesting story yourself, you should really write a book. So this is what I did, and that became Eva's story. We have a few copies, I think you have them downstairs. Later I wrote another book about my brother, which is called The Promise, and then a third book, which is called After Auschwitz, which I have as well with me, a few copies. So, yeah, so this is really how, so when I started to speak, I started to get invitations, mainly in England, of course, then later in Germany. At first I didn't really want to go to Germany or Austria, but we had a play, it's called And Then They Came For Me, Remembering the World of Anne Frank, and it was performed in Germany with the American occupation army. So in English, in this camp, and the German people were allowed to come, and it was partly about me and Anne, and so I went to Germany, and so I met good Germans. I think that was in the 80s, or even 90s, no, in the 90s that was. And I met many young people, and they were very, very upset, very sorry, knowing what their fathers or grandfathers had done. And so I realized those are innocent people. We can't carry on a hatred to people who had really nothing to do with it. But as things go on, like Buddy Elia said as well, we haven't learned. There's still terrible, terrible things happening every day. And now, I mean, even anti-Semitism, but it's not just against Jewish people, the Muslims kill each other and other people, and against Christians, you know, there is black people, all kind of people are still persecuted and killed. And really, really, this has to stop. We are all human beings, we are all, as long as we are decent people, we should be treated the same. And so I spend now my life, I'm 90, and spend now my life traveling the world. I've just come back from a 6-week tour in America, which I do twice 6 weeks tour in America. In January I go to Hong Kong, and then to Holland, and then to Sweden, and then again to America. People really want to hear, but that's not enough. They have to really change their attitude. So that was a long speech
No,
for one question.
John, we obviously in the film we saw your father there, Major Leonard Berney, and he was one of the liberators of the Bergen-Belsen camp. What, if anything, what do you understand from his experience of that of that moment of that time?
Well, at first he didn't want to talk about it at all.
Not I know.
Yeah, it was a taboo subject actually.
Yeah.
My mother tells me whenever there was something on the TV or radio, he'd turn it off, change the subject. It was too painful for him. And many people that liberated Belsen similarly never spoke about it at all. I see on the internet people talking about it and they're saying they went to their death without uttering a word because it was just too painful. So Dad, because for you it was therapeutic to talk about it, right? That first time when you gave your speech it was very therapeutic, and the more you talk about it the more you offload the emotion connected with it. Well, that must have been the same for Dad, and he was lucky in a sense. For me, the first time I remember him talking about it was in '85, which was the 40th anniversary of the liberation. I can't remember whether it was of Belsen or just the Holocaust, but it was in Hyde Park. There was
40 years later. Huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
It took him 40 years before he could speak about it, and then he told me all about it. And it was like incredible that my father's connected to this horrible part of history, but it's a very important part that I need to know more about. And then he talked more and more and more. And then he wrote a book about it's a personal account of liberating Belsen. And he appeared in this documentary and also another one called Night Will Fall, which was played all over the world in almost every TV channel around the world on the 70th anniversary. That was 2015.
Yes.
And he also gave lectures and so on. So he really opened up about it and spoke about it a lot. And writing the book, well, he'd written the book, but my wife and I, we helped him turn it into, edited it and get the photos. So to really know the story was amazing for me. And now I'm sort of representing him, helping keep the memory alive and for the sake of Holocaust education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's so important.
And how did you and Eva come to meet, and how did the film sort of come about through?
Through this film?
Through this film,
Yeah,
actually.
through this film, right.
Yeah, because Paula, who made
Paula,
the film, interviewed Dad, and then I heard that I was kept saying, when is it coming to London? When is it going to be shown in London? The years went by before it was finally played in London. That's when I think the first time we met.
I think in Geneva. We showed it a few years ago in the United Nations in Geneva.
Ah, right.
I have friends in Geneva, and I said we should do it, and she organized it for a couple of years ago now. Huh?
That was amazing in the United Nations building, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But there have been several screenings that we've been at together now. Quite a few people meeting at these screenings. Great.
I happened to be in LA talking, and Paula, who made this film, was just making the film. And when she heard Otto Frank's stepdaughter is here, she of course got hold of me and interviewed me. That's why I'm in the film.
Ah. And
so just by chance, you know?
Yeah, and I think I'm just, let's see, from a personal point of view, just watching the films, that I'm struck by how Anne Frank in many ways has become an icon of the Holocaust and of particularly about childhood and of course the horrors of that. But of course you knew her as a child, as a person.
In Amsterdam. But when her book came out first in Holland, Otto had difficulty finding a publisher. You know, at the beginning people didn't really want to know. But when it was published in America, which Otto had actually great difficulty finding a publisher, there was this Jewish journalist, Maya Levine, who wrote a very, very wonderful article in the New York Times. And it suddenly became a bestseller. Because again, people didn't want Holocaust stories, really serious stories. People didn't want to know. Elie Wiesel, who became so well known, his first books in the 70s, nobody wanted to read it. It was too horrible. But then later people realized we have to know, we have to learn.
Yes.
But the book became then, of course, because that was more or less the first book about that situation. It was not yet a Holocaust book, but kind of an introduction to it. And that was as far as people were able to want to go.
Okay. just to yourselves, Marta and Heather, you're playing these within the context of a play, characters, but of course they were real people. How have you approached that, and what has been the impact of taking on those experiences and those lives?
Well, I think for me personally, throughout this process, I've just always been thinking, it's not about me, it's not about whether the audience like me or not. It's just about portraying this person, because there's a bit more pressure when you are playing a real person to when you're doing just a fictional character from a play. So I've always just been trying to go back to the diary and kind of try and see what she was like through her words. So always in my portrayal of Anne Frank, always try and go back to her and try and make her as true to her as possible. So yeah, that's what basically I've been going back to through this whole process, is just like, this is a real person, this is a real story, and this is what I love about doing this play, just being able to go on stage and portray this real person and kind of say to the audience, listen to this story, this is an actual story that happened, and it's still happening nowadays. So yeah, I think that is what hit me the most. That is my favourite part of doing this play, is being able to challenge the audience's views.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think you've learned as a consequence of this process and this play?
Oh, I've learned a lot. I've learned, it's been quite a tough process talking about the Holocaust so much, and I've really learned how shocking it is that us humans have actually, it was, the human race that did that. So I've just learned really to just fight and kind of challenge people and be like, we need to do something, because that's basically what I've learned, just to do something, because we have to start, as Anne wrote in the diary, saying, like, there's a quote that we say in the play, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And that is really it. That is like, we can all do something to make a change and just avoid this happening again.
And Heather, I understand that you have you've done volunteering, is that right, in France, in refugee?
That's right. Yeah. So in Calais at the moment. Yeah. So there's about it kind of keeps fluctuating, but there's about 1,000 refugees currently spread out along the coast of Calais in just temporary camps. Most of them are just literally in fields, in tents, and they're people that have travelled miles and miles and miles from various countries where they are experiencing persecution at the moment, and it's there's nothing really for them to do except wait and hope that they can get across to the UK. So it's a really terrible situation that's not really being addressed, but it's happening as we speak. So.
And what is it that you particularly do there? What is it that you're
so I volunteer with a charity called Help Refugees, and they have a warehouse in Calais where they sort out donations that members of the public send in. So it's like tents, it's sleeping bags, it's clothes, and they also have a big kitchen there where they are cooking meals for people, so like a nourishing hot meal for people every single day. So it's just being a part of that and going out into the field and meeting these people.
Wonderful. I think it's probably a good time to see if we'd like to take some questions from the audience. We have a microphone, I believe. So if anybody would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Yes.
I would love to just ask, because you both spoke about how long it took you to come and tell other people about your experiences during times of persecution. And I'm curious about Otto. After the war, did he ever speak to you about his experiences through Auschwitz? Did he ever come to you and tell you about what he went through at certain points in his life?
Yes, a very good question, because he as well never ever spoke about it. He was married to my mother for 27 years. I've never seen a more beautiful marriage between those two people. Both had lost their first family, both had lost children. They really did everything together. But Budi says he didn't write the letters at all. He dictated them to my mother. She typed them, and they discussed every sentence. Shall we say it this way? And she said, my mother said, no, you should be a bit more personal, and so she changed it. He never wrote a single letter himself, which was, for me, sometimes when they came to stay with us, I wanted to have my mother, sometimes for myself. I wanted to go to town with her, and Otto always said, they had the mail sent, they lived in Switzerland. The mail was always following them, and every day came such a heap, and Otto said, look, we have to answer this now, because tomorrow we get this again. So my mother went again, typed. She loved doing it, and then it got late afternoon. She said, well, I'm sorry, you know. And I complained, and my mother said, don't tear me apart. Of course I want to be with you, but Otto needs me. So, and he never talked about his own experience. This is what I've heard about, that he was nearly shot, and about the shower and so on, that is only I learned through this film. He never ever spoke about anything what happened to him.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, just over there, please.
As a Jew myself, I've heard you speak before, and I've always found your story really moving. And in my family, my late grandma, she went through the Holocaust, and some of our other family members went through the Holocaust, and my grandma was actually lucky enough to get out on the last train on the Kindertransport, and throughout my childhood, before she sadly passed away in 2014, I was always speaking to her about her stories, and I still find it so awful how anything like that could have ever happened. And as a Jew myself, I'm always worried about anti-Semitism and any threats that I may have in the future. I've been lucky enough to not have any threats yet, but I just wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for the future generation of Jewish people?
I know there is anti-Semitism again, but on the other hand, it's nothing to compare with what it was, this hatred and a plan, to eliminate the whole Jewish people. So, and it's not only against Jewish people, it's against Muslims, and it is against black people, and it is against Christians in some countries. And this is something I try to understand, that religion is, through the years, through centuries, has been the reason of the war and the persecution. And religion is something very, very personal, and so I don't comprehend that. Why people hate each other if somebody has a different opinion about who they worship, where worship. And I think religion should be taught very, very thoroughly in schools, should be explained, that it is a personal thing that people want to do. And if you look really at if you learn the different religion, they all really want the same. It's all, and if we go by the 10 Commandments, which is quite simple, we would have the most peaceful world. This is what we should follow. Just a school should, every morning, the children should repeat the 10 Commandments and know that is where we should live for. And, and a little bit of anti-Semitism, I think that will always be, and we can cope with that. Unless we make a fuss about it, Now, because with all this now, the Labour Party lost so badly, and Corbyn has to go, and so that will cause more anti-Semitism, I think. We should just not be all the time on our guards. It will pass.
Thank you. There was another hand just at the back there, please. Thank you.
The first time that you yourself read Anna Frank's diary, How did that make you feel?
For me?
For you?
Well, Otto gave it to me when the first edition came out in Holland, and I must say I wasn't that impressed. I had gone through exactly, I mean, even a bit, you know, I was arrested a few months earlier than they were arrested. I realized, I mean, I was hiding as well. I was hiding just with my mother. My father couldn't find a family who was going to take in 4 people. So I missed my father and my brother, and I realized Anne and you, and it comes out in the book, of course, as well, that she adored her father. She was really a daddy's girl. She had a bad relationship with her mother, actually. Otto left this out in the first edition. A lot of it was too painful for him. And I thought, well, how lucky she was that she was together with her family. We had house searches, so we had to have a hiding place within the hiding place, because the Nazis came every week to search for hidden Jews, which they never had because they were hidden in the office behind something. So I thought, okay, she had went through it, but she had not such a hard time. But only much later, when I was, you know, I was struggling with myself. I even wanted to commit suicide. I found a note dated 1st of January 1936. I said, life without my father and brother has no meaning for me. And, you know, I really didn't want to live. And it was Otto who, I told him, I hate everybody, not just the Germans, the whole world, because I realized then that, you know, so it could have been avoided if the countries, and you know, now when I fly over the America or over Australia, those countries are huge. They could have easily accepted 6 million people. And, you know, refugees, it's very difficult to become a refugee. That's another thing, you know, I came to a country then, to England, I wasn't welcomed, I wasn't allowed to work, we didn't have any money, I didn't know the language very well. It's very, very difficult. And instead of getting help, you are the bad people, you go back to your own country, you know. And but when I started to speak then, I realized there's a lot I have to tell people, and this is what I do. I'm very open. When I go to America, again the people say, we have enough refugees, we don't need any more, especially of course this government. I said, I get huge audiences, 2,000-3,000 people, and I said, put up your hand if you are a Native American. Well, nobody is. And because they killed 80 million Native Americans. I never knew. I was just now in Oklahoma as well, and they're building a huge, huge museum for the native peoples. And I learned that it was 80 million that were killed. And, you know, and I said, you're all refugees, and look what you have achieved. You built up a country which is technically and amazing. And I must say the Jewish refugees, who were of course the important people, doctors, artists, engineers, scientists, they did get visas. And look how well they have done. And even in the olden days when we had refugees, you know, America needed people to populate this big country. Jewish people came as peddlers without any money, and most of them have become, again, engineers and doctors. They have 240 Nobel Prizes we won as refugees. So, you know, and we in England and in Holland, we took in many people from the Huguenots to England, the silversmiths from the Reformation, when Protestant and Catholic. I went to school in Holland. There was an 80-year war between Christians, between Catholic and Protestants. 80 years, killing each other. destroying their homes, destroying their churches. Both Christian people where it says you shall not kill. And those Huguenots escaped, became wonderful silversmiths in England. Most of the beautiful silverware which is created was for refugees. And so, refugees bring only good things to a new country. But of course they need to be helped when they come without anything. They have to get accommodation, a little bit of help, and be able to work. Most of the refugees are not able to work for 10 years till they're sorted out, which is ridiculous.
Any other questions? Yes, that gentleman there, please.
My grandfather fought in the war, and he said afterwards that politicians caused wars, and he would never fight another one unless the politicians would participate in the active service. And I'm just curious, you must speak to many different audiences. When you come across politicians, what do you say to them? I'm thinking particularly of giving some hope as to how we can change the situation so they don't happen again, and how your comments are received as a question to both of you.
Is it?
To you both.
Well, about some politicians that are really cause of wars, that's what he said. And how do you feel when you're talking to politicians in the audience? How do you address them?
Well, I don't address politicians personally, they're in the audience. Very often the governors come from the state and the mayors from the cities and so on. And they, of course, say, we want the peace and so on. They never say that they're doing bad things. They think they're wonderful. So, but I don't address them personally, I address them in the crowds, and I hope they learn and they change their attitudes. Because, politicians used to be decent people, but unfortunately we haven't got really any, not just in England, in France, in Germany, everywhere. Angela Merkel actually was the only decent people which I know. She took 1 million refugees. It was part of a guilt feeling, I think. But most politicians are selfish. It's their own ego, they want to become important, and as well, partly as well for their party, but they don't think really about the good of the people they are governing. And that is now the trend. We used to have really in America Lincoln, and here we had Churchill, and but those people are very, very rare now to be found.
Okay, we had another hand just there.
I'd just like to know your opinion of the German government and how these neo-fascist groups to the bases are getting in Germany today.
What's your opinion about the neo-fascists in Germany today?
Well, I say at the moment we're going through everywhere again a very, very difficult situation. And as I say, Germany has taken 1 million people in, mainly from the Middle East. And unfortunately, of course, most of them are good people, but there have been some horrible terror attacks. And that, of course, is unfortunately a very, very sad and bad thing. And then the people say, we don't want to have this anymore. And in a way, of course, you can understand that, but you can't just avoid helping thousands of people because there might be one bad one amongst them. So, it is a problem, and we just have to try to find a solution.
Don't you think the German government should do something about the neo-Nazis?
Well, it is a small part, it's not a big part of the population. But everywhere there is a right-wing movement now, and because people are dissatisfied with what's going on now. There's still too much poverty. The difference between the rich and poor has grown to ridiculously heights. And so people go on strike and object and try to change things. The right people think they can change things with a different government. I don't think they can, but they want to give it a try.
And yes, to Alex, please. Thank you.
First of all, Shabbat Shalom. Secondly, I'm Rabbi Alex. I just have one question, and it's really for everybody sitting here, especially in terms of what Eva just said. There are less and less Holocaust survivors in the world, and all of you told different stories, the story about Frank, your personal stories. Why is this story meaningful today for you, and how will you continue to, how do you envision it being told in the future?
Shall I start? Go around. Well, I just feel it's important for people to know what can happen and to think about that when they're about to bully someone at school or criticise them about their colour or their religion or anything like that, because that's where it leads. That's where it can lead, hatred and prejudice and discrimination. So that's why it's important for me to continue my dad's original idea, really, to get the story out, to make sure it's told, make sure people know about it, so that it in his words would to a way of preventing it from happening again. That's my contribution as the next generation.
What's the question?
The importance of why do you have to feel you have to tell the story? What's the importance of keep Holocaust education, basically? What motivates you?
Well, like what you say, we have to learn through history. And you know, I mean, I don't force myself on people, but people want to learn, want to know.
Okay. Marta?
Because everybody is worried that things might be repeated again. So well, there are two sayings. You have to learn through history, not to repeat it. On the other hand, it says history repeats itself. So both things are true, but we want to just listen to learn from history so that it wouldn't be repeated.
Marta?
Well, I'm not Jewish, my family's not Jewish, but I am human and they are human as well. So even though I might not be directly related to the story, it's still important to keep on telling those stories because we are all humans, and it's just an awful thing that happened, and we all together can make a change and make sure it just doesn't happen again, whether it be to Jewish people or to people from different races, backgrounds, religions. Yeah, we just together, we can come together and just make a change and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Heather?
Yeah, I think for me it's about like giving a voice to the voiceless, and the fact that like 6 million is such a humongous number. All those people, you know, that never got the chance to tell their experiences, and I think the fact that we have that privilege, like as actors, to be able to, you know, step into their shoes and retell that story for them, I think that's just an amazing thing to be able to do, and it's almost like our duty to carry on, so that they can carry on living.
Yeah. Could I ask a kind of a follow-up question to that then, just off the back of Alex's question, is do you see any signs of cause for optimism for the future? In any, whenever you
Optimism.
are... Optimism, I know, I'm being... perhaps I'm being naive. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I see with the younger people, the young people are very interested to know. I've got 5 grandchildren, they all do good work, charitable work. They're all interested in climate change, worried about it, and I think we are bringing up a new young generation who are going to see the world in a better place. I'm very, very optimistic for that. Good.
John?
Well, I can only hope that by people knowing about my father's story and Belsen and increasing Holocaust education, it has a positive effect, and it makes people think, and they respect religious beliefs and all people. That's all I can hope to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what motivates me to keep going. And I believe it really does make them think next time they're thinking about being prejudiced or something like that.
Absolutely.
So that's my motivation that keeps me going, and I'll do it as long as I can.
How about you two? Optimistic?
Trying to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are now this next generation.
Yeah.
So if we're not optimistic, then who can be? You know, just learning from the past. And what Heather said, being the voice of the voiceless people.
Yeah, I think it's quite amazing how like we've all like as a group, we've all like put so much into this project, because we all care about it so much. We most of us went to Amsterdam. We went to the Anne Frank House. We just dived into the research because we wanted to know, and some of us have connections to, to the Holocaust. Some of Eleanor is who plays Edith. She's Jewish, so we all. It's amazing how we all kind of have that connection to what happened.
Okay. And I know we have to let you go very, very soon now. Eva, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with as a as advice or as part of your experience?
Well, we must not just live along. We must all take part in what is going on, and the West is still a democracy, and we have a say, and we must not be quiet. We must say what we want, and I hope eventually the governments will realize that they have to do what the population wants.
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of everyone this evening. It's been a huge privilege and honour to have welcomed you to GSA this afternoon, and to have had an opportunity to listen to you, to ask questions of your experience, but also of the tremendous work that you're doing and continuing to do. And likewise, John, thank you so much for coming in today again and for sharing with us the story, particularly the very personal story of your father's involvement in the liberation of Bergen-Belsen, and to you two, obviously, for representing and telling the story, which those of us who are coming to see it this evening will experience. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this evening, and I think particularly thank you to Eva Schloss and to John Wood. Thank you very much.